Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Just doing a quick recording. I learned something today about Domo and I felt compelled to share my learnings with you. And that is around PDP. So, I'd like to this UI. Okay, here we go. I have a data set here. I am the owner of this data set. Let's talk through PDP. If I go to the data set and I go to the PDP tab, I can see policies that are enabled. Now, one thing that's a little bit new and interesting here is here in Domo Community, you have the opportunity to get a sneak peek at some upcoming betas. And here, we're able to see the Columnar PDP beta. At least I think it's still in beta. I'm pretty sure it is. As of today, 6.11, right? It's in beta. But if you want to get your hands on it and like kind of kick around the tires, get a feel for it, hit me up in Slack and we'll get you into the instance so you can play around. In any case, this is PDP, personalized data permissions, or more specifically, row level permissions. Now, one thing I like to do when I'm futzing around in the user interface is I like to monitor the APIs because this is how I get all of my work done. And I mentioned earlier that I learned something today, and the first thing that I learned is that my mouse doesn't like clicking. The first thing I learned today was that the all rows policy is, in fact, a policy. I thought it was just a general setting, and like the user interface just displayed it as a policy, but no, I was incorrect. The all rows policy is, in fact, a policy. And what do I mean by that? Okay, so here we are. I just refreshed my browser. Here's a 200 request against this dataset ID. It hits the V1 data control API for this dataset. And if I take a quick look at the response here, sorry. So let's see what the response looks like. So what this API tells me is it says that PDP is enabled, and again, this API being a put request to data control. Just tells you that PDP is enabled. If I look at filter groups under data control, so data control, dataset API, endpoint filter groups, this response will actually tell me, okay, there's two objects that are part of this response, of which object 0 is the all rows policy group ID 2242, and the second one is policy called JW filter group 2289. Okay, again, not terribly exciting, but just to give you an idea of how these policies work, I can explicitly set a policy for a group or people. So in my all rows policy, I could, for example, say interface. Oh, come on. Okay. I could say, all right, I want to modify this policy and give the group called test creator and a user called test. This guy? Okay. These are the specific groups and people that I want to give all rows access to my data set. And then again, as I click save, let's take a quick look at what happened in network traffic. I believe I will have set a put request to data control 2242. That's the name of my PDP policy, or the ID of my PDP policy. And then I can say in the JSON or in the body, what did I send? I sent, this is my group ID. That's the group that I want to apply the policy to, and this user as well. This group, that user, gets the all rows policy. Very cool. As you can imagine, you'll see a similar thing if I look at JW. my JW policy here. Let me just do a quick modification, press save. So here, new put request to this time 2289, and then in the body I can see, okay, I have some new parameters, right? As opposed to the all rows policy, I'm passing parameters. But what's interesting is that I'm not explicitly sharing with one user or one group. Instead, I'm applying this policy to everyone with dataset access. So anyone who comes to this dataset, all they will be able to see are the rows that meet my filter criteria. And these explicit people, so all admins and dataset owners, folks in the test creator group, or this individual person, they and only they will have all rows access. And again, I can see that differentiation here. Here's 2289. Notice no user ID or group ID are explicitly defined, but data source permissions was set to true, whereas up here in 2242, data source permissions is set to false. This is the thing that I learned today, that what that data source permissions flag does. And if you're not careful with that, if you set it to true, as you apply group IDs and user IDs, you'll override your policies. You'll break stuff. So just be aware of this flag as you're sending API requests. If you're using PyDomo, I actually don't know what PyDomo does. I know what my code does in the Domo library that I wrote. But just be careful of that flag. In terms of previewing the experience, this is another thing that is not necessarily new, but something you want to be aware of. If you hover over a policy and see this little eyeball, you can click on it and you can see, hey, I'm previewing the JW policy and these are the rows that it applies to. That's kind of good, except for as an individual, I can have multiple policies that impact me. And so it can be difficult to see the final view, as it were, of your PDP policies just by viewing one policy at a time. So what I get in the habit of doing is exactly as I've done here. I will create a test account, and I can actually do an individual person, or I can do a test group. I recommend do a group test with a group, not with a person. But for the purposes of today's demo, I'm going to test an individual. And then, of course, what you can do is you can go ahead and set up your dashboard. So I have my test PDP dashboard nicely set up, but the card is in the appendix. So let me get you out of the appendix here. Get you out of the appendix. Okay. Cool. So this looks like a filtered view. It looks like I only see 2 sales reps. And that's because as I look at a dashboard up here in the top left corner, I can see my all rows policy, because I, Jay Wilson, own all rows. Or I can once again select individual policies. But again, this doesn't solve my problem because I'm still looking at one policy at a time. I can't actually see the final policy that Tom Collins is going to see, or whatever. So again, what you might do is you might have a test account set up, which I do. I have tons of test accounts set up, so I'm going to log in as one of my test accounts here. Let's refresh my screen and see what they can see. So now I can see that this account only has access to two sets of two sets of departments, the women's shoes and men's apparel. Is that how I set up my policy? I literally can't remember. RLS stands for row level something. It's not that they have access to specific departments, it's that they have access to specific rows of revenue. And if I extend this, maybe add another. So save that, modify the policy, and then now my test account here will see some different numbers. Instead of seeing 633, they now see they now see 875, right? Because the policy has been modified. That's exciting. Now, you might be noticing that the value for the sales rep has been blanked out. And this is actually a new beta feature that Domo is developing called Columnar PDP. It was announced at Domo Palooza. I'm not spilling the beans on anything. We all saw demos of it on the big stage. But now you can touch it, you can play with it here in Domo community. So if you're interested in Columnar PDP or column masking, um, hit me up on Slack, talk to your AE, your CSM, see about getting into the community instance so you can get your hands on this beta. It's pretty intriguing. So I don't know if you even noticed, but here I am under the PDP tab, but now there's two sections, one for row level policies and one for column level policies. And again, that column level policy is the new user experience, this columnar masking. And this is a little bit interesting to wrap your head around, but what you'll do is you'll start by creating a new policy. And as you do so, just give it a name. So in my case, I have a policy called sales rep. I might call it sales rep masking. And then what you can do is you can say, all right, to whom does this policy apply? So I'm going to say everyone with dataset access. I'm going to redact. Yeah, I'm going to redact the value, so I'm going to hide the sales rep name behind 5 asterisks. And if I look here, we can see, okay, the sales rep's name is in fact hidden behind 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 asterisks. So that's the masking in place, and it applies to this column. That to another column? So like, could I, uh, so what I could also do, let me see if I can do another masking, say partial sales rep mask. This policy is going to show the first, what? Show the first 4 characters and then mask everything else behind an asterisk. Oh, I see. This isn't how you do it. To mask the sales rep column, to mask the sales rep. By default, no one should see anything. So everyone will redact all 5. Now I can create an exception though. I could say, well, if I had a group like the regional leads, which I don't have, so I'm just going to use a test group. So if I had a group of regional leads, I might have a different masking style that says, for perhaps only show the last 5 characters, and everything else should be 5 asterisks. Or, you know, if these were social security numbers, show me the last 4 social security numbers, everything else is an asterisk, but only expose those last 4 to this group of people, and by default, nobody sees anything. Right, so they're giving you the ability to like modify what you see or how people experience this masking. Cool. Well, now to see that in practice, um, like I said, here's my test account. They can only see 5. If I modify this, and let's do show the last 2 characters, and then have a 6 question mark mask. Okay. I know there are some, or last I heard, there are some gotchas on this masking functionality. Obviously, we don't have the ability, or at least I didn't see the ability to do regex. Like, I would love to just be able to show the last name, but it doesn't look like I have an option to apply regex that says find the space and show me everything after the space, or something along those lines. So that's missing. And number 2, I believe you cannot do masking on numbers. So, and as I say that out loud, let's find out. There is a column called revenue. Okay, it's a floating decimal. Create a new policy. If I do a hash, okay, so I'm going to do an MD5 hash on revenue mask. Usually what you would kind of expect like hashing on a revenue to be useful for is like, okay, I don't want you to be able to see the individual values, but I still want you to be able to see the subtotal. See what this does. Can't sum a hash, so maybe this pivot table breaks. Yeah, okay, so you can't, that didn't work for us, right? Because there's no aggregate value in here. But again, hashing the number column might say, okay, well, if you're doing survey data, you're like, well, if there's fewer than 5 survey results, then I can't show you the value because it allows you to reverse engineer how many, you know, approximately what the respondents were, or even perhaps identify who they were. Like, let's say you had a 360 survey and you only surveyed 3 people and you know one of them hates you and you got a 5 or something, a 5 out of 50 or something, and you're like, okay, I know who sandbagged me, right? So it looks like there's a little bit to go on masking with numbers, but the text masking looks like good stuff is happening here. I know that Ben and team are making huge strides in terms of advancing what's possible with these with columnar masking. So again, get into the beta, or sorry, get into Domo community so you can touch some of these beta tools before they come out and go live in your instance. I know they're looking for feedback on how to make this amazing. So yeah, hope you guys learned some fun stuff as we experimented with row level policy and columnar policy. My name's Jay Wilson. You know where to find me. Catch you guys later.